All right, Colossus number 4. So we're going to again go through a shadowed area, which is going to lead us to our Colossus. So we're starting to get this notion that a lot of the areas that the Colossi inhabit are sort of shaded now, as opposed to having all of this diffused light that sort of conquers the rest of the space. Now we're entering into areas that are a little bit more imposing, if only because of their lighting conditions. This next boss, I'm not gonna lie, and hopefully I went through the right canyon. Yeah, here we go. So I like where this boss fight takes place. It sort of takes place near these large burial mounds, which are very interesting because of whatever history they might imply. But at the same time, this boss fight, as an environmental puzzle, it is sort of frustrating. And usually I don't want to focus too much on everything that's happening in gameplay, although when we looked at Gaius, we definitely looked at ways to navigate the Colossi as these really existing, strong entities in the game world. In this case, this boss is sort of a test of patience if things don't go your way, and I want this fight to go relatively quickly, and I hope nothing sort of gets in our way. This is the 4th Colossus. This is Phaedra. Phaedra is a figure from Greek mythology. She's the daughter of Minos. She's the wife of Theseus. She fell in love with Hippolytus, and there's actually a play about all of this written by Euripides. I'm not going to go into the major details, but she sort of falls in love with Hippolytus, and trouble happens. Here I'm going to try a trick that may or may not work. You can actually grab onto the back leg and avoid the environmental puzzle altogether if you just hop on up. And I probably won't get it. Yeah, so you can actually climb up that back leg. So instead we're going to engage in the landscape puzzle here. So we want to get Phaedra's attention and just make it come our way. And we should stress the design of Phaedra too. We've talked about Quadratus as this sort of Colossus that really showed off a feeling of being an animal. Phaedra sort of hits that point too, and I think hits it very strongly. And that's because if you leave Phaedra alone, Phaedra doesn't really go after you. Phaedra just sort of exists in this space. And if you listen to the music, it's just very ponderous and light and slow. And there's not really as hostile a relationship with Phaedra as there was with Gaius. However, Phaedra can be, like I said, a total pain. And some of my commentary here might not be as insightful because I'm going to worry about getting Phaedra to do what I would like Phaedra to do. We've talked about the Colossi as these sort of creatures that are hard to manipulate at times. Phaedra is, like I said, an environmental puzzle. There's no way to get up onto Phaedra. You can see they're really just composed of stone and like this bone rib cage and everything. And so we need to trick Phaedra into sort of behaving in a way that will make it easy for us to reach them. And in this case, we have to take advantage of the burial mounds. It's not that difficult of a thing to intuit because it's really the only thing about the arena that sticks out. But at the same time, making sure that Phaedra acts in a way that we really want it to behave is tricky. I like the fact that it can be tricky. It stresses this notion of the Colossi as sort of their own entities, but at the same time, it can make just the gameplay sort of annoying. What we want to have Phaedra do, hopefully, is sort of turn and go and attack us while we're on one of these mounds. And so this entire process you're going to see is very difficult to do, not only just because of the scale of the creature and because of how difficult it is for Wander to sort of conquer these creatures, but also because just getting them to do what you want to is an absolute hassle. So hopefully we'll get this on our second try. So we want to get Phaedra's attention. We want to really have it sort of on this burial mound here. because we want it to see us, and then we want to go underneath. I like the action that happens here, at least, this sort of deceptive play. It's a different type of engagement with the Colossus. Still, it can get into the realm of being tedious. That tedious nature might stress, sort of, again, how little control Wander has over the situation, but that's if we're being very generous with what's going on here. Instead, I think this is mostly gameplay that's going a little nuts. So we want to hide from Phaedra, and hopefully they'll eventually turn around and jump on that mound, and we'll be able to jump on the tail. You can also hide inside a mound, and Phaedra will stick its face in, but that takes a little bit of time. And now you can see that Phaedra is sort of doing what we would like. This notion of standing and playing with the Colossus really stresses Phaedra as an animal, as opposed to Gaius that sort of saw us as a threat and truly apprehended it. Which again forces us to consider exactly what the Colossus are, or at least what this Colossus is. They seem to be containing fragments of Dorman, but it's not entirely clear how many of these things are created creatures and how many of them were sort of found or repurposed. All of that is left for us to interpret. So here, now we can jump onto Phaedra. It was a little bit of a hassle, but now we've got it done. As opposed to Gaius, Phaedra is actually fairly weak. It should take me only one stab to kill, which makes this very clear dichotomy between sort of Gaius as this human-like figure, this militarized Colossus, and Phaedra as this sort of passive one that just sort of stands over the graves of the dead and doesn't really do much. Phaedra doesn't act until I provoke her, or it rather, and they don't really do too much even when I do. They don't have many active ways of attacking me. So the difference between a Colossus that is human and one that is more animal becomes a little more clear, although as time goes on those lines are going to get a little bit more strained. The trick once again is sort of holding on as we are stabbing. Losing control of your player character is a nice way to make your character feel fairly ineffectual, which we keep on talking about Wander as, but you can see that as the journey continues and as the player gets more competent, Wander does as well. This is partially represented by the fact that in a traditional game, every time you defeat a Colossus, your grip gauge gets a little larger. So as you learn how to defeat these creatures, you sort of learn how to hold on stronger and deal with them in easier ways. So Phaedra this time was very cooperative, but still probably one of the game's trickier or at least inconsistent puzzles. It's hard to tell whether or not the inconsistency of that puzzle adds a ludic pressure or tension to the player. If anything, though, it certainly does make the encounter a little different. Our next Colossus is going to really turn our understanding of what Colossi are sort of on its head. We've seen Phaedra as animal, we've seen Quadratus as animal. So long as I'm not getting my Colossi out of order, this next one is really going to stress this notion that these are magical creatures that already exist in this sort of holy space. I enjoy the bond between Agro and Wander, if only because there's an implication that Agro has a certain awareness of what's going on, and that makes the bond between them even stronger. This game has a very nice position towards nature, which is partially expressed in the Colossi, but largely expressed through the bond between Wander and his horse. So now we have our new target, and we are back to gameplay. And that was this section, Section 4, Phaedra, probably one of my least favorite Colossi in the game, but we managed. And we had a little bit to talk about. I don't think there's a large connection to the mythological figure Phaedra, but if you're interested, look up the story. At least look up the Euripides play. It's pretty good. But there we are. I hope you continue to the next Colossus. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will see you around.